For nearly 800 years, a Muslim civilization ruled part of Western Europe. It built the largest library on the continent. It pioneered algebra, optics, and modern surgery. Its capital had running water and lit streets, while most of Europe was still living by candlelight and mud roads. And then, in a single generation, it vanished completely. This is the story of Al-Andalus, how it rose, how it became one of the most advanced societies on earth, and how it was lost. If you find stories like this compelling, consider subscribing. It genuinely helps this channel keep telling them. In 711 CE, a small army crossed from North Africa into the Iberian Peninsula, modern-day Spain and Portugal. It was led by a general named Tariq ibn Ziyad, commanding a force representing the Umayyad Caliphate. The peninsula at the time was ruled by the Visigoths, a Christian Germanic kingdom that had grown politically fractured and deeply unpopular, with much of its population, including a large Jewish minority, facing severe persecution. Tariq's forces defeated the Visigothic king Roderick at the Battle of Guadalete, and what followed was less a violent overrunning of the land than a surprisingly rapid political collapse. Many towns and cities negotiated surrender terms rather than face destruction, and within about 7 years, most of the peninsula had come under Muslim rule. The new territory was named Al-Andalus. What's often overlooked is how this new society formed. Al-Andalus wasn't simply Arab Spain. It became a genuine cultural fusion. Arab and Berber settlers from North Africa, the existing Hispano-Roman and Visigothic population, and a significant Jewish community all became part of its social fabric. Under Islamic rule, Jewish and Christian communities were generally granted protected status as dhimmi, permitted to practice their religions and maintain their own courts and internal governance in exchange for a tax, a system with real limitations. By modern standards, but strikingly more tolerant than most of contemporary Christian Europe, where Jewish communities in particular faced frequent expulsion and violence. By the 10th century, under the Umayyad Emirate and later Caliphate, based in the city of Cordoba, Al-Andalus had become arguably the most sophisticated urban center in Western Europe, and one of the most advanced cities on earth. Contemporary accounts describe Cordoba as home to hundreds of thousands of residents, at a time when most European cities numbered in the low thousands. The city had paved, lit streets. While London and Paris were still centuries away from anything comparable, it had public baths, extensive libraries reportedly holding hundreds of thousands of manuscripts, and a level of literacy among its population that stood in sharp contrast to much of the rest of Europe at the time. Cordoba's Great Mosque, begun under Abd al-Rahman I and expanded by successive rulers, became one of the architectural wonders of the medieval world, a forest of over 850 double-arched columns built, partly from repurposed Roman and Visigothic materials, reflecting the layered history of the site itself. This was also a period of extraordinary intellectual output. Scholars in Al-Andalus made major contributions to medicine, astronomy, philosophy, and mathematics. The physician Al-Zahrawi, often called the father of modern surgery, authored an extensive medical encyclopedia that would go on to influence European medical practice for centuries afterward. The philosopher Ibn Rushd, known in Europe as Averroes, wrote commentaries on Aristotle that would later shape scholastic thought across Christian Europe. Jewish scholars flourished here too. The philosopher and physician Maimonides, one of the most influential Jewish thinkers in history, was born in Cordoba during this era. Court culture blended influences from across the Mediterranean and Islamic world. Poetry, music, and craftsmanship flourished. Trade networks connected Al-Andalus to North Africa, the wider Islamic world, and beyond, bringing new crops, irrigation techniques, and technologies that transformed Iberian agriculture. For a period of roughly 2 centuries, Al-Andalus stood as a rare example in medieval history, a large, wealthy, religiously plural society that produced scientific and cultural achievements still studied today. Nothing this successful stays unified forever. And Al-Andalus's decline began not from outside conquest, but from internal collapse. In 1031, the Umayyad Caliphate of Cordoba fractured entirely, splintering into dozens of smaller, competing kingdoms known as the Taifa states. Each Taifa ruler governed a city or small region, and many of these courts continued to sponsor remarkable scholarship and art even as political unity crumbled, but militarily, the fragmentation was catastrophic. Instead of one strong unified Muslim power, the peninsula now held dozens of small, often mutually hostile states, some of which began paying tribute to Christian kingdoms simply to survive, and some of which even formed alliances with Christian rulers against rival Taifa states. This fragmentation coincided with a gradual but steady shift in the balance of power on the peninsula. The Christian kingdoms in the north, Castile, Aragon, Leon, Portugal, and others, began a centuries-long process later termed the Reconquista, slowly expanding southward, sometimes through outright conquest, sometimes through political pressure and tribute demands on weakened Taifa states. Two North African dynasties, the Almoravids and later the Almohads, intervened militarily to try to reunify Al-Andalus and push back Christian advances, achieving real successes for a time. But by the 13th century, Christian kingdoms had retaken most of the peninsula's major cities. Cordoba fell in 1236, Seville in 1248, leaving only one significant Muslim territory standing, the Emirate of Granada, tucked into the mountainous south. For over 200 years after the fall of Seville, the Emirate of Granada survived as the final independent Muslim state in Western Europe, a remarkable feat of diplomacy, fortification, and at times, simply paying tribute to more powerful Christian neighbors to maintain a fragile peace. It was during this final period that Granada produced perhaps its most famous legacy, the Alhambra. Built primarily under the Nasrid dynasty, this palace fortress complex remains one of the most celebrated works of Islamic architecture in the world, a masterwork of intricate geometric tilework, carved stucco reflecting pools, and gardens designed around the sound and movement of water. Visitors today still walk through its Court of the Lions and its horseshoe arches, standing as physical testimony to a civilization at the edge of its final chapter. But Granada's survival was always precarious, dependent on the Christian kingdoms of the north remaining divided against each other. That changed in 1469 when the marriage of Isabella of Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon unified Spain's two most powerful Christian kingdoms into a single political force. Once internal Christian rivalries were resolved, Granada's centuries of careful diplomatic survival ran out of road. The final war began in 1482, complicated further by internal conflict within Granada's own royal family, which weakened its ability to mount a unified resistance. Over roughly a decade, Ferdinand and Isabella's forces systematically captured Granada's outlying towns and fortresses, tightening the noose around the capital itself. On January 2, 1492, the last Nasrid ruler, Muhammad XII, known in Spanish accounts as Boabdil, formally surrendered. The city of Granada, the negotiated terms known as the Treaty of Granada, initially promised religious tolerance, protection of property, and the right for Muslims to continue practicing their faith. Under the new Christian rule, those promises did not last. Within a decade, forced conversions began. By 1502, Muslims in the former Kingdom of Castile were given a stark choice: convert to Christianity or leave. Those who converted, known as Moriscos, remained under deep suspicion for generations, culminating in their mass expulsion from Spain entirely between 1609 and 1614. The final and complete end of nearly 9 centuries of Muslim presence on the peninsula. The Jewish community suffered a parallel fate even earlier. The Alhambra Decree of 1492, issued the same year Granada fell, ordered the expulsion of Jews who refused to convert to Christianity, ending centuries of Jewish life in Spain as well. The fall of Al-Andalus wasn't simply a change in political rule. It was the deliberate dismantling of one of the most culturally rich, religiously diverse societies medieval Europe had produced. Libraries were destroyed or dispersed. Manuscripts were burned in mass book burnings, including a notorious 1499 campaign in Granada that destroyed thousands of Islamic texts. Architecture was repurposed or altered. The Great Mosque of Cordoba itself was partially converted into a cathedral, a structure that today stands as a striking physical record of the peninsula's layered, contested history. Yet the influence of Al-Andalus didn't simply disappear. Its scientific and philosophical texts, translated into Latin in cities like Toledo, fed directly into the European Renaissance. Its agricultural innovations reshaped farming across the Mediterranean. Its architectural style influenced buildings across Spain and Latin America for centuries afterward, and the descendants of its scholars, Muslim, Jewish, and Christian alike, carried its intellectual legacy outward across the Mediterranean world. Al-Andalus stood for nearly 800 years, longer than the United States has existed, longer than most empires in history. It was not a perfect society by modern standards, but for long stretches of its existence, it achieved something genuinely rare in the medieval world. A place where Muslims, Christians, and Jews built, studied, and created side by side, producing scientific and cultural achievements that outlasted the political structures that made them possible. Its ending is a reminder of how fragile, even centuries-long, civilizations can be once unity breaks down, and how much of what a society builds can outlive the society itself, carried forward by the ideas, texts, and structures it leaves behind.